Ooh, 5-second rule.
Not here at the Center for Food Safety. There's no such thing as 5-second rule.
Unfortunately, she's right. We are at the University of Georgia Food Safety Center. Every year in this country, we prepare and serve billions and billions of meals and snacks. We have relatively few foodborne illnesses. Still, there's about 50 million cases of food poisoning in America every year. That means 1 in 6 of us is getting sick from something we ate. The good news is farmers, the food industry, and scientists are working to keep us all safer. The bad news is most of the time we get sick from eating something, it's our own fault. Come on, let me take you where the food comes from. Dr. Francisco Diaz, we are at the University of Georgia Food Safety Center in Griffin, Georgia, not on the main campus in Athens, where most people think about University of Georgia. What is the scope of the food safety spectrum that you deal with and as you work with it here at the university?
That's a really important question. Our name of the center is Center for Food Safety, but our scope is mostly microorganisms that makes us sick. Mm-hmm. Let's say, as you mentioned, salmonella, bacterial pathogens, virus pathogens, and also parasites.
We see this on the farm every day. We see the attention to food safety, the attention to sanitizing packing lines, processing rooms, packing rooms. We see the attention to food safety in hand wash stations on the farm, all the way down from the micro level up to the point it leaves the farm. Where does the university's focus on food safety begin? And is it that entire spectrum? And are you trying to cast that huge net that covers it all somehow?
Yeah, we're fortunate that we can claim that we work all the way from the farm to the consumer. The reality is the bulk of the foodborne disease happens because somebody messed up at the kitchen. Cross-contamination, poor cooking, poor handling, oftentimes that will lead to infections caused at the home. But yeah, we look at every single aspect. The mission of everyone working food safety is we would be feeling that we have accomplished our mission when nobody else gets sick with foodborne disease. Of course, that's a lofty goal.
Big.
But I think that's where we start. The principle is getting a foodborne disease is unacceptable.
At home, we leave food out too long. We let it sit on the counter to cool down too long before we refrigerate it. Maybe we thaw it in the sink overnight instead of doing what's recommended. But for the most part, when it comes to food safety, we're our own worst enemy at home.
At home, I guess we would make a big difference in if we were able to convince the general consumer, to use hygienic practices when it comes out, as you mentioned, the handling of the food, the cooking, the temperature, the use of thermometer, to convince people that to wash their hands thoroughly before preparing the food and before eating, because one way or another, hand washing is a way that we transmit the pathogens.
A whole lot of things, but especially
because the fecal oral route that we talk about.
Sure.
And some of the transmission of cases like norovirus, which is the number one pathogen in the country.
But problematically, as you're telling us, and as we've seen otherwise, sometimes the contamination can be in the food itself. Sometimes the contamination is introduced by us or some other factor along the supply chain. You have to deal with all of it in the full spectrum.
Oh yeah. I mean, the scenarios that we run in our research, we have to look at all possibilities depending on what pathogen we're working.
Ideally, would the goal be, and is it even feasible or conceivable, that you could prevent that contamination from ever happening in the first place?
Yes, that's. I guess that would be ideal. If
That's the magic bullet.
if you want to target the field or all the way to pre-harvest, that would be ideal. But that's a lot more challenging because there are many environmental factors and also the cost. I guess what would take to make sure that there are no pathogens in a crop field.
Well, enough money would solve everything, but enough money is always a problem, and especially in the, say, a field of scientific research.
Yeah, and with foods, one thing that we have to recognize, despite the price of foods going up, the U.S. has one of the cheapest food supplies in the country, or not the cheapest, but the lower cost food supply. So I think food safety changes that we want to introduce, sometimes we're facing the fact that may not be feasible. I guess the profit margins in food are not the greatest sometimes, but and because we have such a rich food supply, but in many cases we have to recognize that food in this country is relatively affordable.
Comparatively speaking, Americans spend less of each dollar on food than really any other country in the world. And there are many countries where people are spending as much as half of every dollar or more simply surviving and feeding themselves and their families enough.
Yep, that's correct.
Dr. Diaz, I recognize one thing here. I'm pretty sure those are tomatoes that she's working with in these little baggies. What's going on at this experiment station?
Yeah, this is Minji Her. She is a PhD student in our program, and her project is about testing the use of blue light against pathogens in different surfaces.
Blue light. Now, when we say blue light, that's something we're starting to hear more about in the bacterial control world. The same way that we know that UV light has antimicrobial properties, blue light itself has those kind of properties as well.
The reason why you're exploring blue light is because it's less hazardous to the worker.
So UV light is hazardous to the workers who are involved in the food safety side of things, but blue light is thought to be less hazardous, is known to be less hazardous.
It's proven to be less hazardous.
So now
it doesn't affect your eyesight. It doesn't affect your skin.
So the University of Georgia is trying to determine if blue light alone can be as effective in controlling bacteria as the full UV light spectrum.
That's correct.
And we can do that starting with a simple tomato. Mayra Villarbuso, you are a master's candidate in food microbiology and food safety at the University of Georgia. This is your domain here. We saw you working earlier on something that looked perfectly safe and perfectly innocent. What we could not see that you were putting onto those plates was what?
It was listeria.
Listeria, that's become no one's favorite friend. In fact, it can be a very lethal infection. Listeria is one of the foodborne illnesses that can kill. What were the concentrations of Listeria bacteria on those plates?
It was about 10 to the 4th, 10 to the 5th.
10 to the 4th, 10 to the 5th.
Milliliter.
So let's put that in human terms. How much Listeria was on those plates, Mayra?
It was a lot.
How many people could that make sick? My guess would be a whole lot.
Yes, if you put that in a batch of food that is being produced in a plant, it could get a whole batch or a whole lot of food contaminated.
So that much could spread through a whole lot of people and make a whole lot of people very ill. But what are you looking for? What is the purpose of the experiment that you're working on, the work that you're doing right now?
Well, we are testing Listeria's growth on cheese.
On cheese?
Specifically on a kind of cheese that is usually called queso fresco.
Queso fresco, the soft white cheese that's from Latin cuisine that's so wonderful and delicious. But again, it's a fresh cheese, it's a soft cheese.
Yes.
Are those more problematic for bacteria, or bacteria like those better than a hard, firm, aged cheese? Or
Yes, so the hard cheeses are fermented and soft cheeses are very fresh. The amount of moisture they have is very high, and the pH is the pH that bacteria love. So they have the best conditions ever for bacteria to grow on them. It is friendly for both good bacteria and bad bacteria.
it's not discriminating, it's just the host.
Yes. So in this case, we want to know how good bacteria interact with this bad bacteria, Listeria, and see if there is a way that good bacteria can control or limit Listeria's growth. Because in that case, there would be a team of good bacteria that could just prevent Listeria to keep growing.
And that might lead to a new process, a new product, a new means of limiting that bacterial growth, thus making the food supply safer, thus making queso fresco safer. So it's just delicious and wonderful, and you never have to worry about that middle of the night, uh-oh, I ate something I shouldn't have.
Yeah, that eventually could be one of the applications of the results we might get in our study.
Dr. Diaz, laboratories look like laboratories. And I've been in a bunch of them. There's everything here is pretty familiar. Science is the same, whether you're working with food, whether you're working with other things.
Yeah, it could be similar.
The equipment
Some of
and
the
the
same
tools
bottles,
are
the
the
same
same.
test tubes, the same
Beakers,
beakers,
the same
and the same
coffee
mixers.
grinder.
Oh well, we're a food laboratory,
So
but we don't
you're
drink
drinking
coffee
a lot
here.
of coffee here?
No, not at all. This is a little bit misleading, but we use coffee grinders for grinding pecan shells.
Pecan shell? Why would you want to grind pecan shells?
Well,
That's-
because we're studying whether there's a presence of antimicrobial substances in pecan shells.
Really?
Yes.
And is the thought that there is? Is it anecdotal? Has
Well,
there been previous research?
We have some preliminary data that indicates that it has some inhibitory to some bacteria.
So it could prevent bacterial growth. There's something in these pecan shells potentially, and it suggests that there is, that could help create a product that would control bacterial growth in the future. How long a process would it be from the first time somebody said, let's look at pecan shells and see what we might find here, until you might get an actual real world application?
Well, it's years. This is something that it doesn't happen. It won't happen overnight.
Right.
You can, if you get lucky, probably maybe a year, but for actual application would take much more than that, because I guess, yeah, in the laboratory for, let's say, for a publication, you may get it done within a year. If you get sufficient data that demonstrates there is an effect, within a year you can get a paper. But then after you get the paper, it depends whether somebody else will be able to corroborate. And for actual application, the bottom line will be very critical, whether the cost of the new.
How much money
treatment.
can somebody make on it? How affordable is
Well,
it? Can
whether
you put it into production economically
yes,
and it show benefit at
I guess the key question:
justifiable cost?
what's going to be the cost, the impact cost to the product? Because, for example, with wheat, this is a commodity that carries a very small profit margin. So it's whatever you're going to do to the wheat needs to be very low cost,
Right.
in order to be feasible. For example, the target that we had for this project is to have a impact cost of only 30 cents per 100 pounds of wheat.
That's one thing I think people don't understand. You go to the grocery store, you go to the restaurant, and you go, why does food cost so much? Why is it going so high? The prices go up and up and up and up and up, but people don't understand the margins in farming are pretty thin.
Yes.
The margins in retail are pretty thin. The margins in restaurants are larger, but the input costs are more.
Oh yeah.
So as you're working with food in particular, in the medical world, you don't necessarily have those constraints. You have to consider cost. No one has grocery store insurance.
Yep.
Maybe we should to help offset rising cost of groceries. In the medical world, that's less of a concern. It can be less about a practical application than a cure, and then we'll find out how to make it affordable. You're already coming into every situation understanding the margins for profit are so thin at every stop of the food chain, we can't add additional cost because the people at home can't afford it or won't support it.
Yeah. That's something we have to take into consideration whenever we're developing a new treatment for against bacterial pathogens.
Money, 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 money.
Yeah, well, that's the name of the world wherever you are.
Let's walk on through the lab. I thought before today I was a pretty smart guy. Now I'm not so sure. So let's talk about some of the things that people at home can do to protect themselves. Let's talk about some common misperceptions, maybe the ways we're hurting ourselves without realizing it. For instance, every kid knows about the 5-second rule. You know, if you drop something on the ground, if you pick it up before 5 seconds, you can still eat it. It's still good. Real or not?
Well, there is no scientific evidence that supports any validation of the 5-second rule. That's just the bottom line. If you have a wet piece of food that falls, is going to probably pick up whatever dirt is on the floor, and also what kind of how dirty is the floor is also another variable. So there are different aspects, but I think the 5-second rule has my response is there is no scientific validation.
Not a thing. You heard it here first. So we bring our food home from the grocery store. I think a lot of us have already learned now, turn on the sink, maybe get out your colander, start rinsing your fruits and veggies under running water. How long should we rinse them, and are we doing the right thing?
My personal preference is to use the bowl, because that
A bowl?
way, yeah, a bowl or somewhere where you are able to soak the lettuce or the tomatoes or whatever you're rinsing, so that the entire surface is well covered. Because when you put when you hold it under the tap water, you're not going to be 100% sure that you covered the entire surface.
Right.
In dipping into the water, then you will assure that it's all fully covered.
What about handling meats and poultry? For instance, we don't cook a lot of turkey at our house, but a couple of times a year, holidays, like everybody else, we're dragging the turkeys through the door. We're putting it in the sink. We're going through the proper thawing. We're thawing it in the refrigerator, and we'll talk about thawing in a minute. But the turkey, we put it in the sink. We wash the turkey. We'll wash a chicken. Good or not good?
Nope, not good.
Not
That's,
good.
That's washing your poultry. It's a bad practice. From the point of view of food safety, you're putting yourself in greater risk, because the moment that you have the stream of tap water onto the piece of bird, if you have any Salmonella, Campylobacter sitting on the surface, they're going to just spread all
And
over
so
the
then
place.
now the whole bird is going to be contaminated.
Well, not the bird. Your kitchen's going to be
Your whole
contaminated.
kitchen is
Yeah,
gonna be
the contamination comes from the bird, not from
So as you're rinsing, it's spraying.
It's spreading, and if you especially if you use some sort of shower,
Like I do.
imagine just the micro droplets that are going to be hanging around, and if you catch a few droplets of Salmonella floating, they're going to land in different places in different foods.
Now, I think one of the things that we've heard about so much that some of us just roll our eyes when we hear about it is thawing food. What is the proper technique to thaw something to prepare it to cook?
Well, it's predominantly thawing it in the fridge. I guess I'm hesitant to give you any more alternative recommendations, because that will open up the possibility that you're going to open the risk. Because if you let it thaw outside of the fridge, and you're careless, you could potentially go above what we call the danger zone.
The danger zone.
So when you have something frozen, it's below 32 degrees.
Right.
And then as the piece of meat is thawing, the temperature is going to go up.
Right.
And in general, we have this lower limit of 40 degrees.
40 degrees.
So if the meat would stay below 40 degrees, then you could do almost whatever you want.
Right.
The problem is, how can you ensure that the meat is below 40 degrees? Or the other upper range limit is the 140. So, but the temperature in between 40 and 140, that's the one that we don't want the food to be sitting for a very long time.
So that's the purpose and the result of your work, the research team that works with you here at University of Georgia, at many other institutions like this around the world. You've got to understand everything that we already know could go wrong. Look for the new things that could go wrong. It's your job to keep the rest of us a little bit safer every day.
That's okay. That's a role of scientists, but I think I have to acknowledge the fact that they are the producers of foods and the manufacturers and the regulators, that their efforts every day keeps us from getting sick.
Billions and billions of meals prepared and served around the world daily, and especially in this country and in the developed world. Very little foodborne illness relatively. That's due to that work. It's due to the fact that starting on the farm, your safety is top of mind. You might not believe it, you might not think so, but they're always thinking about keeping you safe out here where the food comes from.